911, what's the emergency?
My wife and I need an ambulance for bleeding.
I was called at approximately 4 o'clock in the morning on February 3rd, 2018. There had been a home invasion robbery in the area of Hale Plantation.
You said someone was in your house?
Yes.
I'm being advised that the wife has severe injuries and was currently being trauma alerted to our area hospital.
You woke up to her scream, and tall figure with ski mask starts fighting with you with a knife.
I felt something sharp.
Susan Reuschel almost died that night.
If Susan had died, the truth of what happened that night would die with her. When Susan Reuschel comes out of surgery, she tells investigators that there is no intruder, and that the person who inflicted all of the injuries that she is suffering from is Michael Reuschel. This case is about the power of money. It's about the power of desire for control.
When Susan asked for a divorce, Michael Reuschel snapped.
When he was faced with the prospect that he would have to give her half of his fortune, he made a calculated and premeditated decision to kill.
This is the knife that was used to stab Susan.
The bending in this knife, you believe, is a result of it hitting bone, and it bent the blade.
That's correct.
All rise for the jury.
Members of the jury, we're just going to lay here until you die, Sue. We're just going to lay here until you die. Those are the words of that defendant, Michael Reuschel, spoken to his wife of 10 years, Susan Reuschel.
I got close to her right here, and her hand comes out, and
was there anything in her hand?
Yeah, a knife.
There's no way on God's green earth that my father would stab anyone.
Was Mike's daughter, Caroline, a source of conflict in the marriage?
Absolutely.
Didn't you tell Michael Reuschel that you hated Caroline?
Those words came out, yeah.
And in fact, you called her a bitch. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yes.
Never in 1 million years would I think that my wedding would be the catalyst of all of this.
Who do you believe brought the knife into that incident?
Susan Reuschel.
Who do you believe was the attacker in the February 2nd incident?
Susan Reuschel.
And who is the victim?
My father.
Where were you and how did you learn that your father on February 3rd, 2018 had been arrested?
I was in Chicago with my husband and I got an incoming call on my cell phone.
This is a collect call from...
It was a recording that said an inmate from the Alachua County Jail has called you.
An inmate at the Alachua County Department.
Minutes later, the phone rang again. Caroline Reuschel quickly answered and heard the voice she'd known her entire life.
And he said, Caroline? you have to get me out of here. You need to call my lawyer. And I dropped to the sidewalk, and I just sat on the sidewalk.
The events leading to the arrest of Mike Reuschel began to unwind very early that morning after he called police.
Tell me exactly what happened.
I don't know. Someone was in the house, and next thing I know, I wake up next to my wife and we're bleeding.
Mike reported that he and his wife Sue had been stabbed by an intruder inside their home in an upscale section of Gainesville.
You're fine with the subject and he just ran off. You managed to scare him off?
Yeah, I guess.
Sue's injuries were life-threatening, and as medics rushed to save her, Detective David Visconti was called to the scene.
There was no forced entry initially observed by any of our deputies.
No broken window, no knocked down door, nothing like that at all?
No, sir.
Still, Visconti had no doubt that something terrible had happened inside that house.
There was most certainly a struggle. There was a vast amount of blood around the bed that was located on the wall of the bedroom.
But overall, the scene was missing something, Visconti said, and he did not believe a violent intruder had been there.
Typically, we'll see many things: knocked over furniture, items broken, indentations in the walls, in the drywall.
Did you see any of that?
None of those things were present.
What's more, the Reuschels had security cameras covering the outside of the house.
The intruder allegedly fleeing the house from that direction is something that would have been captured on video.
The veteran detective was becoming suspicious. Then, hours later, Sue awoke from surgery and broke this case wide open, telling detectives that the story about an intruder attacking them was a lie. She claimed that Mike concocted the whole thing and that he was her true assailant. Mike was arrested and charged with attempted murder.
He could never have done anything like this.
Mike's ex-wife, Dee Dee Hoffman, was incredulous.
I have known Michael James Reuschel since I was 19, and I wouldn't be here today if I thought Mike was possibly capable of harming another person.
Dee Dee met Mike in college. They married and had 2 daughters, Caroline and Kate.
During your many years with Mike, was he ever physically abusive to you?
He never touched me, not ever. Never.
But, like in many marriages, there were problems. Mike made millions in the technology business, but his job required him to travel all over the world.
Truthfully, he wasn't around much, so it was hard.
In 2005, after 25 years of marriage, Dee Dee asked for a divorce. Dee Dee said she moved out of the family home so their children, away at college, could always return to the house where they were raised. But soon, another woman unexpectedly joined the family.
I moved out in July, but then all of a sudden, Susan moves into our house.
Sue was then 38 years old and a hospice nurse. She and Mike, 49, met on Match.com, and Dee Dee says Sue quickly became the lady of the manor. Dee Dee says everything she left behind, including her dog, became Sue's.
Mike and I were really opposites. He was engaging and outgoing, and I was really, and I think I still am, more reserved, not quite so exuberant. And I think he was looking for exuberance.
Caroline remembers the first time she met Sue at a dinner.
And my dad seemed to be laughing and having a good time.
But Caroline says she couldn't help but notice how much Sue was drinking.
We've never seen anyone take down 5 to 6 martinis and be able to stand and speak.
Some 2 years after they met, Mike married Sue in August 2007. Mike stopped traveling and bought a local business. The couple's happier times are reflected in some of the thousands of text messages that surfaced during legal proceedings. Mike refers to Sue as his trophy bride and writes that their lives together are simply amazing. But Caroline says Sue became jealous of the close relationship she had with her father and tried to keep them apart.
She had such walls around him. He wouldn't call me unless he was in a car alone. He wasn't allowed to take my call in front of her.
But surprisingly, when Caroline announced in 2016 that she was getting married, Sue was happy to help. But Caroline says Sue wanted to do it her way.
Sue was pretty adamant about throwing me a shower. My mother was invited, but none of my mother's friends were invited. So the majority of the guests were Sue's friends and family.
But Caroline admits the shower was a lot of fun, and she was looking forward to the wedding. Sue helped her pick out a dress.
I tried on a dress, and I liked it. And Sue kept telling me, like, this is your dress, it's so beautiful, you have to have this.
Sue handed over her credit card, and it was done.
Do you mind me asking how much the dress was worth?
Ugh, this is so gauche. I think it was
$11,000.
Yes.
The wedding itself in November 2017 would be a royal-like affair. The setting was the sumptuous Oheka Castle on Long Island. 160 people attended the wedding, and Caroline says the day was magical.
My husband and I know how lucky we are to have had that weekend. It was beyond beautiful.
Caroline says it was nearly perfect, except for something that caught her eye, an unusual mark on her father's face.
The last thing I saw before walking down the aisle at my wedding was this white scar from here to here. And in my mind, I was like, what is that?
Weeks later, she found out. Mike revealed to Caroline what he said was a dark, disturbing secret. He claimed Sue had been physically abusing him for years.
I called him on his birthday, and I said, how are you doing? And he just started crying.
It was late November 2017, just 3 weeks after her fairy tale wedding, when Caroline says her father shared a disturbing secret about Sue that he had promised not to tell.
And he said, Sue was arrested, and he said, she started attacking me. And I think he was so victimized that he was really scared to tell anyone.
Sue had been charged with domestic battery, but the details of what happened that day would not become public until 2 years later, at Mike's trial for attempted murder.
Do you swear affirm at the evidence?
When they both testified about the last tumultuous months of their marriage.
Ma'am, please be seated. Speak clearly.
What was the state of their marriage?
I think it was in the lowest place that it could possibly be before a divorce.
I was upset.
Sue told prosecutor David Byron that shortly after Caroline's wedding, Mike told her it had gone nearly $150,000 over budget.
Was it fair to say that you were partially upset with the defendant, but mostly at Carolyn?
Yes.
Mike says Sue attacked him when the fight escalated.
She throws the phone at me, charges around the bed, pushes and just start her eating like this.
But Mike didn't call 911 that day. Sue did.
I just felt as though things were a little out of control.
When police arrived, Sue admitted to pushing Mike and agreed to go to their beach condo to defuse the situation. But she was arrested half an hour later when she hadn't yet left the house.
He said, please place your hands behind your back. You're under arrest.
Sue told the jury that she was ordered to stay away from Mike. She moved to their beach condo and got counseling for alcohol and anger management. Weeks later, Mike declined to pursue the battery charge, and it was dropped. Prosecutor Sean Brewer.
Did she have a problem with alcohol?
Susan Reuschel has testified that at times when she would drink, she would lose her temper.
But Mike says Sue's actions went way beyond a bad temper. He told the jury she had tormented him for years.
She lunged at me again, punched me in the face, scratched my face, punched me in the arms, and bent my glasses, actually.
She would throw things at him, very heavy things, like vases, and very heavy coffee mugs.
Sue denies abusing Mike, and Mike never reported any of the alleged incidents to police.
Is it true that you have seen your father with a black eye?
He's sent me multiple pictures of him with a black eye.
Mike did take photos of some injuries, which he shared with Caroline and later the jury.
He has a picture that he showed me of his face gushing blood, and there was one mark from here to here.
The prosecution admits this injury may have been caused by Sue, but they say the evidence shows Sue was fighting for her life after Mike attacked her.
There are text messages where she accuses him of smothering her with a pillow, which in fact is the same instance that she ended up scratching him in the face.
Despite the alleged abuse and Sue's arrest, Mike says he still loved his wife and wanted to stay married. In February 2018, he asked Sue to come to Gainesville for the weekend.
Mike had asked me to come in. He wanted us to work on the marriage.
They decided to go to their favorite steakhouse. That's Sue on home security video getting ready and enjoying a glass of wine. Mike arrives home and the two share a kiss before heading out. But over steaks and more wine, old wounds reopen.
He had just received a text message from Caroline.
Sue says that's when Mike admitted he had betrayed her trust by telling Caroline about Sue's arrest.
He and I both agreed that we weren't going to discuss that.
Mike drove home alone. Sue followed in an Uber, her anger spilling into a series of text messages about Caroline. Good luck with your bitch. She will ruin any relationship you have. Once home, they went to separate parts of the house. Sue continued her angry texts. I am filing for divorce. I will leave in the morning. The last text from Sue is sent at 10:13 p.m. You have serious boundary issues with your daughter. Later, Sue says she was alone in the guest room when Mike entered. There are no cameras inside that room.
And he just hopped on top of me. And I felt like this pressure right here. And then all of a sudden I saw a knife come out. I said, oh my God, Mike, did you stab me? And he said, yes.
At some point, does he say something to you?
He said, Sue, we're not getting a divorce.
Sue says Mike was on top of her, pinning her arms with his legs. In the struggle, her left thumb was sliced. Then she says Mike stabbed her again.
And my neck right here.
Sue says Mike then started slashing her wrist.
Felt like he was mutilating me. My hand, it was like just, I couldn't feel anything, and I could see into my arm.
Losing blood, her life in danger, Sue says she vomited and lost control of her bodily functions. She says she tried to wriggle out from under Mike, and they ended up lying sideways across the bed.
He just said to me, Sue, we're just gonna lay here until you die.
Sue says as she was lying there, struggling to stay awake, she saw Mike raise the knife yet again. Desperate, she offered him a way out.
I said, Mike, we don't have to divorce. I won't divorce you. Just put the knife down.
Sue says after Mike put the knife down, she begged him to call for help. But he would only do that if she agreed to say an intruder had stabbed her.
When she agrees to go with his story of the intruders, she saved her life.
A toxic marriage, texts brimming with hate, and a bloody room. Mike Reuschel's future will now depend on whether he can convince jurors that he is the real victim.
What is the strongest evidence that supports Sue's account? See more of the trial evidence at 48hours.com.
When first responders entered this bloody scene in the early morning hours of February 3rd, 2018, they'd been told by Mike Reuschel that a stranger had broken into their home and assaulted his wife, and then him with a knife. But in court, now with his defense attorneys Patrick McGinnis and Ann Fennell, Mike admits that story was a lie and says he's finally ready to tell the truth. He says despite Sue's drinking and violent outbursts, he was hoping to reconcile that night.
I don't care if she's a melodrunk the rest of her life, just the anger's got to go.
But at dinner, once again, they fought about Caroline, and that fight continued back at the house. After that, Mike and Sue's stories diverge. Mike says he came into the guest room a little after 10 and was startled to see Sue kneeling on the bed holding a knife.
I said, Sue, give me the knife. And then next thing I know, I felt searing heat. And that's all I remembered. And I'm just trying to get my hands on it. And I'm on the bed with her now. We're all on our knees.
Mike doesn't say how he got his hands on the knife, but he says as they struggled and fell over on the bed, he felt the blade go into Sue's stomach.
She's falling backwards and I'm falling in front on top. I felt the knife penetrate here, and I rolled off as fast as I could because I was afraid if that went in her, it would kill her.
Mike offers no explanation for how Sue was stabbed in the neck or thumb, but he does say about 1 minute into the struggle, he somehow calmed her down and put the knife out of reach.
Now, you're both bleeding during this point in time, right?
Yeah, but it's not spurting, and there's no blood at all you can see on Sue through here.
Mike says he wanted to call for help right away, but Sue wouldn't let him because she was afraid she'd be arrested again.
I said, Sue, we need to go to the hospital. And she said, then make up a story so I don't get arrested.
Mike says they argued about a possible cover story, but then, as bizarre as it sounds, they just lay together, bleeding for several hours, having what Mike says was one of the best conversations of their lives about future vacations to Europe.
We talked about going to Germany on the Rhine and Moselle River cruise. Maybe we'll do Burgundy next.
If Mike is speaking the truth, this happy conversation happened on a bed soaked with blood and human waste.
Greece, because we've never been to Greece and Carolina.
Mike never mentions that.
Tuscany and Florence.
And prosecutor David Byron suspects why.
Is this believable? I don't think it's believable at all. He held her there, and he can't admit that. Michael Reuschel had months and months to go over the evidence and construct a story that fit with things that he couldn't admit.
According to Mike, at about 3 a.m., their dog, Susie, wandered into this bloody scene where violence was about to erupt again.
I get up out of the bed to deal with the dog, and behind me was the knife, and next thing I know, she sliced her right wrist with her left hand.
Did you talk to her about why she had cut herself?
Yeah, she said she doesn't want to go to jail. I said, Sue, I'm not going to send you to jail. I'm not going to get you arrested. Calm down. She goes, you promise, you promise? I said, yes.
As Mike tells it, Sue cooked up the whole idea to lie to police, and he reluctantly agreed in order to protect her.
I said, then the only chance I have is to turn the cameras off to give a window of opportunity to say someone broke in and did this to us.
Mike says after Sue cut her own wrist, he left the room to turn off security cameras and stage a break-in. 25 minutes passed before he called 911 and turned the cameras on again.
And he's doing that with the knowledge that with every beat of her heart, more of her blood is pouring into that bed.
But the defense thinks the blood at the crime scene helps to prove their case.
People lie. The forensics don't lie, and that's why the blood spatter was so important in this case.
Michael Berklin is a former doctor and bloodstain pattern analyst who testified for the defense.
What do you consider the most important blood evidence inside that bedroom?
The arterial spurt patterns.
Berklin says he reviewed records which stated a small artery in Sue's wrist was cut that night. And he believes the blood here on the pillowcase and here on the nightstand came from that artery.
The important thing about arteries, though, is that you get blood coming out of that with every beat of the heart.
Berklin uses stage blood and a small syringe to demonstrate the way Sue's blood may have traveled, making a line or fine spray of drops.
So the blood, in your opinion, gives us a timeline as to when Sue's wrist was actually cut.
Correct, because arteries don't close up on their own.
Remember, Sue says the attack, including the cuts to her wrist, started sometime after 10:13 p.m. But Mike says Sue cut her own wrist at around 3 a.m., hours later. Berklin says if Sue's wrist was cut before 11, she would have died long before help arrived.
How much time does she have to live, in your opinion?
If the wounds happen no later than 11 o'clock, she's dead before it ever hits midnight.
Which leads you to believe what?
When it comes to this injury, to the wrist, Michael's story makes more sense.
The defense team says if we can't trust Sue's account about what time things happened, then her entire story is suspect.
It is absolutely impossible to have happened the way she claims it did.
Inside this box,
this is the knife that was used to stab Susan.
Encased in protective plastic.
This is a lot of blood.
This is a lot of blood.
Are the remnants of the vicious confrontation inside that bedroom that prosecutor Sean Brewer is certain contain evidence of an attempted murder.
This is Mike Reuschel's pajamas.
Yes, and they are soaked in blood.
And whose blood is that?
Well, Susan is the one that had the injuries that provided the mass amount of bleeding.
So if blood could talk, this blood is telling you what?
This blood is telling me that Michael was on top of her while he was stabbing her, and she was bleeding quite a bit without any aid.
Prosecutors say this evidence backs up Sue's testimony that Mike attacked her. They also say the items on that bedside table help prove this was not a dynamic fight between two people. David Byron says that only one person had control of the situation, Mike Reuschel.
There's a full glass of wine, there's some glasses, there's a lamp, and it's evidence of the fact that Michael Reuschel was so physically capable of constraining her that none of those things are disturbed.
And the prosecution disputes defense expert Michael Berkland's claim that these stains on the nightstand came from spurting blood from Sue's wrist. Instead, their expert says the blood was most likely cast off, flung from the knife, and not from Sue cutting her own wrist.
The cast off shows that he was swinging that knife as he's plunging it into her stomach and into her neck.
Did you call Dr. Berkland to the stand?
Prosecutor Brewer not only attacks Berkland's conclusions, he also challenges his credibility, letting jurors know that his medical license was suspended and he was later arrested for storing body parts from autopsies in Tupperware containers in an unusual place.
You were storing them at Uncle Bob's storage shed, weren't you?
In a climate-controlled room.
Were you storing them at Uncle Bob's storage shed?
Yes.
And the actual organs that you were storing included brains and hearts?
I did have some hearts and brains, yes.
Berkland says the organs were preserved for private cases he was working on while he was still a licensed doctor.
I used the storage locker because they were safe and secure. Either that or I put them in my house. This was safer than my house.
The charges were later dropped. Prosecutors also want the jury to know that the severity of Sue's wrist wound suggests she did not do it herself.
The one that was truly life-threatening was the cuts that the defendant made to her wrist.
She was cut all the way down to the bone.
Mike's injuries were a lot less serious. As you can see, he had some small cuts on his fingers and stomach. And Sue says these larger cuts to his forearms were in fact self-inflicted.
He put the knife in my hand and he stabbed himself in the arm.
And what about that story Mike told investigators that an intruder did all this? The prosecution says it was all his idea to cover up what he had done.
He turned off the cameras and did things to make the police believe that there had been a burglary.
And the motive for this alleged attack? The prosecution believes it was all about money, that Mike didn't want to give up half of his fortune, millions of dollars, in a divorce.
You didn't tell this jury, and after all you've been through, it didn't seem fair for Susan to take half your money?
Yeah, that is true. It didn't seem fair.
The prosecution refutes Mike's claims that he still wanted to reconcile the troubled marriage by pointing out that he had visited 3 dating sites.
Ukrainian single girl Irina, she's 18 years old, right?
I looked at pictures of women with clothes on, yes, sir.
I understand they have clothes on, sir. The question I'm asking is, you were looking for your next girlfriend, right?
No, I'll tell you exactly what I was looking for.
Sure.
All I want out of a woman in my life is someone to be kind and nice to me. That's all I care about. I looked at pictures and descriptions of how they would treat their male, and Sue and I looked at these together many times in our relationship and saying, Sue, that's all I need from anybody. Please be nice to me, please.
The defense counters that Mike's other internet searches prove that he was being abused by Sue.
Did you visit numerous sites related to battered husbands?
Yes, I did.
He has all of the economic resources. He's not cut off from any family members. Michael Reuschel doesn't meet any of the criteria for what a battered spouse is.
The defense also tries to counter Sue's claim that Mike's attack came after she threatened divorce. They produced dozens of text messages going back to 2015 that show Sue had made that threat many, many times.
You actually say, for the 50th time, I want a divorce.
It's just an expression, like saying for the, 100th time.
But it is about 50 times, isn't it?
I don't know, I didn't count.
And defense attorney Ann Fennell suggests those texts also reveal Sue's destructive intentions.
Have you told him I hate you?
Yes.
Okay. You've said I will destroy you.
Yes.
And on your anniversary in 2017, hate you. Happy 10th anniversary. I'm divorcing you. You said that.
Yes.
In her closing argument, Fennell insists Mike would never try to kill for money. She says Sue was the aggressor that night, and Mike was just defending himself.
She hates everybody. She hates his daughters. She hates his former spouse. That's how hateful this woman was and is.
But the prosecution says there is no question Mike wanted Sue dead.
This is not a frenzied struggle between two adults. This is a bloodbath committed by one person who has imprisoned the other on that bed.
In the War of the Reuschels, jurors will soon decide which one they believe.
Whose story rings true, Mike or Sue Reuschel? See more of their home security footage on Facebook at 48 Hours.
As the jury goes out to deliberate, what are those minutes and hours like for you?
I just couldn't talk to anyone. I spent the past year and a half mentally preparing myself for the worst and hoping for the best.
Caroline does not have long to wait.
All rise for the jury.
After a 9-day trial, it took little more than 4 hours for the jury to reach a verdict.
They say a quick verdict is often a prosecutor's verdict.
It's a thought that creeps into your head, but you never really know what a jury's going to do.
Members of the jury, I understand you have reached a verdict.
We have, Your Honor.
Please pass it to my bailiff.
We, the jury, unanimously find as follows to defendant Michael James Reuschel in this case. As to count 1, the defendant is guilty of attempted first-degree murder as charged in count.
Guilty. Mike Reuschel is convicted of the most serious count against him.
We were all so shocked.
As to count 2, the defendant is guilty of false imprisonment.
In quick succession, the jury also finds Reuschel guilty of 4 additional crimes, including false imprisonment and tampering with evidence.
Juror number 51, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Jurors utterly reject Mike's story of a knife fight with his wife. Prosecutor Sean Brewer says justice was served to a man who lied to investigators and to the jury.
Michael went through great lengths to try and kill Susan. He just wasn't very good at it.
And what's more, Brewer says, Mike Reuschel tried to kill Sue not once, but twice. While he was in jail awaiting trial, an informant came forward to claim Mike tried to hire a hitman to kill Sue, a charge Mike strongly denies.
Do you believe that your father, in jail, plotted to hire someone to murder his wife?
No. Honestly, I don't mean to laugh, but it is beyond laughable.
As we were interviewing Caroline, she got a phone call that surprised us.
Dad? Hi, I'm good. I'm with 48 Hours right now, literally with cameras.
Mike Reuschel allowed me to ask a few questions.
Mike, I just want to hear you tell me, did you take a knife into the room that night on February 2nd, 2018, and attack your wife?
Absolutely not.
And you're telling me the truth?
Absolutely, on my children's lives. All I did was defend myself and I got attacked.
In December 2019, everyone returns to Judge William Davis's courtroom for sentencing. The victim in this crime, Sue Reuschel, does not appear in person.
Remain standing, face the judge, and raise your right hand, please.
When it's Caroline's turn to speak, the moment is charged with emotion.
No one is as positive, caring, and generous than this man. I will say, I am and will always be a proud daughter.
One of the most caring, kind, gentle people I've ever met.
Several colleagues and friends speak of Mike in glowing terms.
He's a good person.
The Mike Reuschel I know is a stand-up gentleman.
Then Judge William Davis took center stage.
Mr. Reuschel, will you please stand?
Mike was about to learn his fate.
The person I heard through the evidence and the witnesses was somebody who was cold, they were brutal. On count one, the attempted first-degree premeditated murder, I'm going to sentence you to 30 years imprisonment in the Department.
All told, the judge gives Reuschel 30 years, not the 50 years requested by prosecutors. But for Mike, who is 64 years old, it is, in essence, a life sentence.
Here are two sophisticated people, very wealthy, living in paradise, in one of the most beautiful parts of Florida, and yet they couldn't work this out. It's a real tragedy, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, when you hear who Michael and Susan Reuschel were before this all occurred, they lived exemplary and mostly normal lives. And to see it get to this point really is a tragedy.
The War of the Reuschels is not over. Mike and Sue are divorcing and continue to fight over the marital assets, including the house where Sue was nearly stabbed to death.
The murder-for-hire charges against Mike Reuschel were dropped. A California lawyer murdered.
This looked like a targeted assassination. This guy dressed as a delivery man.
Across the country, a matching deadly attack at a judge's home.
Who would want to hurt the judge?
Were the crimes connected? 48 Hours, next on CBS.
Andreen McDonald had a very, very strict regimen. She followed it daily.
Nice, drop it. That a girl.
She would be at the gym at 5:30 in the morning, in the office by 8. On March 1st, they had no indication she would be late. She didn't show up for work. This was very significant to her employees. They called the gym and found out she never showed up to the gym, which is like a religion to her.
After calling Andreen repeatedly, it's going to voicemail. You know, the anxiety starts setting in. Like, I start panicking. For Andreen to be missing is not possible.
The biggest issue for me were the fact that her phone was missing, her purse was still there, her keys were on the counter, and her vehicles were still there.
If her vehicle's there, her purse is there, her keys are there, if she's missing, is there a concern of an abduction?
Well, the deputies obviously didn't know what to think at this point. They were just beginning the investigation. What we did learn is Andreen McDonald, a beautiful Jamaican woman, was brought to the United States by Andre, her husband, as a major in the Air Force and had top secret security clearance. They began an assisted living business where they, in short order, became millionaires. The picture of the American dream.
She's not boastful or anything like that. She's just that humble person.
Andreen had a great reputation in not only the assisted living community here in San Antonio.
And we're on the side of the street this morning and we're giving out food for those less fortunate. And
she was very, very generous with her wealth and her time.
God bless you.
Kind of a rising star of San Antonio.
Absolutely, very much so a rising star.
They were always laughing together. They were always joking around.
The home didn't seem to be in terrible disarray. No furniture was knocked over or anything was broken. I found there was blood on the wall in an area that was kind of odd. There was blood and hair on a light switch. We assumed that something happened there. It was a crime scene of some sort.
I was on social media and I saw that initial poster that came out with her face, and then it says missing on the top. Andreen is not the person to go take off somewhere no one knows where she is.
Supporters for Andreen McDonald renewed their search efforts.
When the months went by and the days went by and they haven't found anything, in my mind, that's not such a bad thing. Because if they're not able to find something that solidifies her being dead, I mean, she's alive, right? And she's somewhere.
In the afternoon of March 1st, 2019, after 29-year-old Andreen McDonald was reported missing by her mother, Maureen, a Bexar County Sheriff's deputy arrived at the McDonald home in an upscale gated community in San Antonio. Within minutes, Sheriff Javier Salazar says his deputy made a disturbing discovery.
One of my deputies had seen what they believed to be blood on the wall and possibly hair.
And in the backyard, normally beautifully landscaped, another troubling clue, a random burn pile.
Right here, I saw the burn pile. We found a zipper from Andreen's blouse.
It was Andreen's blouse.
Andreen's husband, Andy McDonald, told the deputy that when he woke up, he got their daughter Elena to school, before reporting to Lackland Air Force Base, where he served as a cyber warfare analyst. Once he learned Andreen was missing, Andre rushed back home, but he quickly headed out the door again to act on a hunch that Andreen, who suffered from migraines, might have gone to a nearby hospital for treatment. Andre's arrival to the hospital was captured by surveillance cameras. Lead investigator Frank Stubbs.
On that tape, he comes in, you can see him asking for McDonald. And they tell him, there's somebody in room 3 named McDonald.
He arrives back to the house. What does he tell them?
He tells them that she's in the hospital.
But when the deputy called the hospital, he discovered that the McDonald who had checked in was not Andreen McDonald. Andre told deputies that he rushed back home before seeing his wife because he had left his cell phone at home and wanted to let Maureen know he had found Andreen.
There was some indication to him that she was there and injured to some extent.
Unfortunately, the major's hunch turned out to be wrong.
When I heard, I was so upset. I was just thinking that she's someplace that we can find her.
And for Andreen's mother-in-law, Jackie, who lived in Florida, there was uncertainty.
I had called Andreen's phone about 1,000 times already, saying, Andreen, whatever it is, please, please, just call me back.
What concerned everyone was the fact Andreen would never just disappear. She was known for her sense of responsibility and dedication to her family and business.
How would you describe Andreen?
She knows what she wants, and she will never stop until she get it.
I did come in before he did.
Right, Andreen did defeat me, and she is so excited.
Andreen created an assisted living business in San Antonio called Starlight Homes when she was just 22. And according to Andre's close friend, Andrew Reuschel,
in order to start the business, Andre, he liquidated his 401k.
Andre bankrolled her dreams.
and he sold the BMW that he owned.
They were doing so well. They were doing everything that would make any mother proud.
Starlight Homes thrived, and under Andreen's watch, the tiny home-based business transformed into a multi-million-dollar enterprise in just 7 years.
When I started my assisted living, I only started with 3 residents. Today, Starlight Homes Assisted Living, we have 2 locations in the San Antonio area.
Childhood friend Mandy says Andreen's success was born out of humble beginnings.
Growing up in Portland, Jamaica, we didn't have a lot. And so we figured if we wanted to get somewhere in life, it would be in America. That's where the dream was.
Andreen's dream of coming to America came true at 19 when she met Andre. He was also a native of Jamaica who at the time was a captain in the U.S. Air Force. Andre had returned home to Port Antonio in May of 2009 to attend a funeral where he met Andreen, who was 10 years younger.
Was there an attraction right from the beginning?
She was excited when she met him, excited about the captain in the Air Force. They both decided for her to come to America.
They married that July.
I was happy to know he had met somebody that he could have a life with.
That life would soon include a baby girl, Elena. Elena was at the center of Andreen's world, which made her disappearance so perplexing, says Jackie.
I don't think Andreen would just get up and walk away and leave Elena and nobody would hear from her.
That evening, a forensic crime unit examined those stains in the bathroom and confirmed the initial belief that they were blood.
While you were going through the house, was Andre there?
Yes, he was.
Did you see any signs of bruising on his body, any signs of any injuries, that perhaps he'd been in a struggle?
Nothing that we could determine.
Investigators were hoping Andre had some answers, but he said the last time he had seen his wife was the night before, and they said what Andre described raised more questions than answers.
He had told them they had come home from the tax preparer's office and that they had argued over the business, and he went up the road, got some gas, and just cooled off. We were able to obtain video evidence of him going to the Shell station.
Andre said when he returned home, he and Andreen went to separate bedrooms. But according to investigators, what Andre didn't mention was the text exchange that happened at the gas station. For investigators, the text messages found on Andre's phone revealed a marriage in turmoil, including allegations of betrayal.
Accusations of unfaithfulness in these text messages, correct?
That's correct.
We have a printed copy. Would you mind reading these from his phone?
Andreen responds, "If you bring up Abed again, I will divorce you myself."
Aben Hall, a businessman living in Port Antonio, Jamaica, who, according to investigators, was Andreen's ex-boyfriend and potentially her current lover. In response to Andreen's threat of divorce, Andre texts, "I don't care if you get a divorce. You brought Aben into our life." Aben dated Andreen when she was a teenager, say investigators. Andreen's close friend Mandy says the two rekindled their romance in 2017 during one of her philanthropic trips to the island.
Aben has always been that first love. It wasn't something Andreen got over emotionally.
Mandy says they carried on their affair in secret until the summer of 2018, when Andreen got 2 new tattoos, an initial A tattooed on her hand and a date tattooed on her wrist.
Andy was definitely suspicious of what it meant.
With a suspicious mind, Mandy says Andre went to work to solve this tattoo mystery.
He went and he did his own digging.
It was on social media where Andre discovered an interesting photograph of Aben branded with the same exact tattoo that was also on Andreen's hand. And those numbers, 14-3-76, they're Aben's birthday, day, month, and year.
She told me that she impulsively got the tattoo. She knew it was something stupid to do.
Enraged, Mandy says Andre threatened divorce unless Andreen cut off contact with Aben, covered up her tattoos, and promised to never travel to Jamaica without him.
She did cover up the tattoos. She didn't want to lose half of everything she worked hard for.
At Andre's 40th birthday party, Mandy says by all outward appearances, the McDonalds seemed to be getting along. But just 13 days later, on March 1st, 2019, that's when Andreen disappeared. The once festive home had transformed into a crime scene as investigators worked the McDonald residence until 2 the next morning. When they couldn't locate Andreen's cell phone, investigators checked to see if her credit cards or passport had been used. All dead ends.
We came up dry on all of these inquiries. At this point, all we had was a missing person.
Within hours of his wife's disappearance, Andre McDonald was a person of interest. He stopped answering questions and lawyered up. At 2 p.m. the next day, an undercover investigator assigned to watch the McDonald's house noticed that the garage had been damaged and Andre was backing out of the driveway. The investigator followed him to a nearby gun shop, where additional investigators who were called to the scene observed Andre purchasing a 9mm handgun and ammunition.
We were under the assumption that he was purchasing a gun to probably harm himself.
When Andre walked back to his car, investigators confronted him. Their violent takedown may be disturbing to viewers. Investigators moved to detain the Air Force major and turned him over to military authorities for a mental evaluation. Meanwhile, investigators returned to the house with a search warrant and checked Andreen's car. While there, some objects caught their eye.
There was a shovel, there was an axe.
An axe, there was like a hatchet kind of maul. There was trash bags. There were gloves and a couple of gas cans.
And there was more.
Inside the garbage can in the house was a receipt from Lowe's that had been torn up.
Detectives were able to obtain surveillance footage from the hardware store, items that were purchased the day after Andreen went missing.
This is Andre McDonald coming into the Lowe's. He's going to purchase several items. You can see him with a basket here. You can see there's a shovel in the basket. Now he comes up here. There's 2 gas cans. There's a maul or a hatchet. Here's that axe.
Yes. What's at play here?
It appeared to us that now that his wife is missing, it pointed to the disposal of her body.
Look at that cart full of ill will, right?
Yes.
And in the corner of the garage, investigators would uncover what they say was the most damning evidence of all.
We found a hammer and clothing in the garbage. The clothing that we found appeared to be Andre's clothing.
Investigators say they found traces of blood on the pocket of these jeans.
What's on the claw hammer that's of interest?
The lab determined that there was the presence of blood on the hammer, and the DNA that they obtained from that blood sample was from Andreen. We concluded that that hammer was probably used as the murder weapon.
This is significant.
Very significant.
48 hours into the investigation, Detective Stubbs believed he had discovered key evidence that implicated Major Andreen McDonald in his wife's disappearance. Investigators located those items stained with Andreen's blood inside the family's trash can. This missing persons case had become much more sinister.
And it's pointing toward what?
The evidence was pointing towards a murder.
But there was a problem. None of the evidence collected proved that a murder had actually occurred.
Turning a missing persons case into a homicide case is very difficult.
On March 3rd, 2019, the Air Force concluded its evaluation of Andree and released him. Civil authorities quickly moved in and placed him under arrest.
Daughter, love my family.
What do you have to say about this entire investigation?
But it wasn't for murder. Major Andreen McDonald was arrested for tampering with evidence, based upon that torn receipt found at the house listing the items he had purchased from the hardware store. Andree's arrest left his mother, Jackie, in a state of shock and disbelief.
I saw that Andree was taken into custody. And I just collapsed. I know he loved Andreen. Why would he harm her?
And for Andreen's mother, Andree's arrest left her head spinning.
Oh, God. Andree could not hurt Andreen. That's what I was saying, but who else?
Adding to everyone's sense of shock, confusion, and suspicion was Andree's decision to stop cooperating with detectives.
Andree's face told us there was no way in hell we were going to break him and make him tell us what had happened.
Sheriff Salazar went on local TV asking for help.
We are asking anybody with any information on her whereabouts to give us a call at 210-335.
Soon after, the community of San Antonio, along with family and friends, came out in droves to look for Andreen, including a volunteer search party formed by former Air Force Airman Bobby Green. Bobby took us out to one of the areas where he searched for Andreen.
Right now, we're behind a hospital. We thought he might have taken her here to a wooded area.
As you walk through here, what are you looking for?
You would look at tree branches that had been pushed away, something that was cut, fresh tire tracks.
How many miles did you cover?
It was hundreds of miles.
As search efforts continued, Andreen McDonald was released from jail on bond.
Where is Andreen?
With his wife absent, Andree took over management of Starlight Homes. Search efforts continued, although investigators say Andree didn't take part. Days would eventually turn into months of dead ends. As the search for Andreen went on, investigators dug further into the couple's relationship, learning that they had business problems as well as romantic ones. In WhatsApp messages shared with friends, there are arguments over who really was the brains behind their successful business. In one, Andreen tells Andree, "Starlight Homes is my idea, my dream, and would not have happened without my drive." Back then, friends like Andrew Reuschel became worried about the potential for violence.
And I have text message from Andreen that's saying, someone is going to snap.
Andrew told investigators that the couple's war of words turned physical the night before a Christmas party at their home in 2018, where the McDonalds got into a physical altercation.
So when I went into the kitchen, Andy and Andreen were grappling on the floor. The next morning, they were laughing about it. I did feel uncomfortable after that. I thought the situation had become toxic.
Just over 2 months later, Andreen's blood was spilled in her home and she vanished. Finally, on the evening of July 11th, 2019, 133 days after Andreen had gone missing, there was a break in the case.
About 7:30 this evening, the Bexar County Sheriff's Office patrol deputies were dispatched to this location for a report of some human remains that were found.
Skeletal remains were located in a farmer's field just 6 miles from the McDonald home. This man, Clifton Clabundy, made the discovery. Clifton had taken out his tractor to retrieve a cow skull that had been spotted right along the tree line of the property.
I saw what appeared to be a human skull in front of the cow skull.
That must have been a shock.
A shock, yes.
Officials determined that the human skeletal remains belonged to Andreen McDonald, her sister, Cindy Johnson.
I was at a church praying for Andreen. I couldn't do anything. I broke down.
It hit us like a storm, because we still wasn't thinking like that.
Never. I never saw this coming.
Less than 48 hours later, Andreen McDonald would be arrested and charged with his wife's murder.
See more evidence from the case at 48hours.com.
Andreen's family had waited for justice for 4 years.
It hurts. Every night before I go to my bed, I think about her.
Bexar County Assistant District Attorneys Stephen Spear, Lauren Scott, and Ryan Groomer would prosecute McDonald for the murder of his wife, Andreen. But the prosecution would face an uphill battle. Despite the evidence found at the McDonald home, the hammer and the blood, the prosecution could not say for sure how Andreen died.
Because Andreen's body was out in the elements in that field for all of those days, medical examiner's office was unable to specify what exactly caused Andreen's death.
And does that, Stephen, complicate your preparation?
No, it absolutely does. We say he caused her death, however, we don't know how.
If Andre murdered his wife, what do you believe was his motive?
I believe it was largely because he felt emasculated. She was such a rising star, had control of these businesses, and I think he was jealous of that.
McDonald, who pleaded not guilty, was represented by some of the top defense lawyers in San Antonio: John Convery, Zoe Russell, and John Hunter.
How would you respond to the notion that what caused all this was his envy of his wife's success?
I don't see any evidence of that.
Andre is a major in the Air Force. I mean, he's incredibly successful in his own right.
Major Andreen McDonald had been under house arrest since April of 2021. But days before his trial was set to begin, January 17, 2023, McDonald, who had remained silent about his wife's death, began telling an extraordinary story, beginning with his own mother. Jackie says her son told her Andreen's death was an accident.
He looked at me and he said, "Mom, I'm going to tell you the truth." And he started to cry.
McDonald then called Andreen's mother and sister Cindy, who put the call on speakerphone.
He gave the family for the first time details of what happened, according to him.
According to him, yes.
It was a phone call that stunned his defense team.
Was it shocking to you that he had done this?
Shocking's a good word for it, yeah. The entire context of the case changed.
His best thought would be to tell his story in court.
McDonald would get to tell his story, but not before the prosecution laid out its case in opening statements.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Inside the trash bin in the garage, a hammer. That hammer has blood on it. It is the victim's blood.
The defense contended that Andreen's death was an accident.
This is not a murder case. It is a case about the degree and level of responsibility with evidence of accident. a mutual fight, all of which happens in the blink of an eye.
The prosecution also called forensic pathologist Dr. James Feig, who testified that Andreen's skeletal remains had severe injuries consistent with being struck by a blunt object. She had a fractured spinal cord, a broken rib, and a split jaw. But the pathologist could not determine what exactly had caused Andreen's death.
So the way that I have phrased her cause of death is homicidal violence, including blunt force trauma.
After 6 days of testimony and 33 witnesses, the prosecution rested. The defense had only one witness.
Defense calls Major Andreen McDonald.
McDonald described the evening of February 28, 2019. While at the tax preparer's office with his wife, he discovered that Andreen had started a new business a year earlier without his knowledge.
What did that signify to you?
Basically, that meant to me pretty much that she was robbing me.
After a heated argument that evening, McDonald says he left the house to cool off at that gas station. McDonald says they continued their argument over text. And when he returned home, he raised the possibility of divorce and splitting their business in half.
She became extremely irate at the thought of splitting the business. She charges into the room to confront me. So when she comes into the room, I turn around and she comes like right up in my face. So at that moment, she spits in my face. So at that point, I grabbed her, because she's like right in front of me, so I grabbed her head. I think we had like a clash of heads, and I think it opened up like a cut somewhere on her face.
McDonald said Andreen ran into the bathroom and turned on the lights. When Andreen saw her bloody face in the mirror, McDonald claims she attacked him. His testimony may be disturbing to some viewers.
When she comes, she's like throwing like some punches, so I'm trying to like duck down and like keep my face from getting hit with the blows. I remember like grabbing her and like tripping her, and then she like falls, and that's when I kick her like twice. The second kick, I think I heard like some type of wheezing, and then also like in the background, I could hear like some footsteps.
The footsteps of their young daughter, Elena. McDonald said he left to put Elena back to bed, and when he returned about 30 minutes later, his wife was dead.
I became like pretty frantic at that point because, she's dead on the floor.
You never thought I needed to
In cross-examination, prosecutor Spear asked if McDonald had thought about calling 911.
I never thought about calling anybody to revive a dead person. My purpose at that point was simply to get her out of the house so that my 7-year-old daughter wouldn't see her mother laying on the floor dead.
After putting Elena back to bed, McDonald said he dumped Andreen's body in this field, stripped her naked, and returned home to burn her clothing, which left that burn patch in the backyard. But what about Andreen's blood on the yellow hammer? On the face of it, the evidence doesn't square with McDonald's account of an accident. McDonald had an explanation for that. He testified that when investigators finished searching his home, he went back to the field before dawn, angry and armed with the yellow hammer, a can of gasoline, and a plan.
My plan was to hit the person that caused this whole circumstance. And
you felt it was her fault, right?
It's absolutely her fault.
What did you do with the gasoline?
I poured it on her, and then I used the lighter and set it on fire.
McDonald said when the flames subsided, that's when he attacked his wife's corpse with the yellow hammer.
I hit her in the face, the neck, and I just like hit her again as I was walking away.
Why that last blow?
As I was walking away?
Yes.
I guess I was still angry when I was walking away.
After that gruesome testimony, the defense shifted gears and tried to refocus the jury on their theory of the crime. And for the first time, the defense brought up why McDonald acted the way he did that night.
Have you always believed you acted in self-defense?
Yes, I've always believed that from the very beginning.
The defense played videos showing Andreen giving her husband a piggyback ride and working out.
Would you describe Andreen as a very strong, powerful woman?
Yes, I would.
Straight up. According to McDonald, his wife could lift up to 300 pounds.
Yes, ma'am! When she attacked you, were you in fear?
Yes, I was in fear of, being harmed during that whole situation.
They want you to forget and disregard about all his actions.
Closing arguments.
Defense counsel said that this is self-defense. Folks, this is not self-defense. It's time to hold this man responsible for what he did. And it's time to find him guilty of murder.
Andreen McDonald did not intentionally or knowingly murder Andreen McDonald. He acted in self-defense, and your duty and your obligation is to say, not guilty. Thank you.
After 6 days of testimony, the jury got the case.
All rise for the jury.
Approximately 11 hours into their deliberation, the jury sent a note to the judge
that says, we're hopelessly deadlocked.
What do you make of Andreen McDonald's claim of self-defense? Chat now with the 48 Hours team on Facebook and X.
After almost 11 hours of deliberating, the jury was deadlocked, unable to decide if Andreen McDonald was guilty of murder, manslaughter, or not guilty by self-defense.
Everything was said in the courtroom. All the evidence were there. He confessed on the stand what he did. They saw his demeanor. I don't know what was the problem.
For jurors Brandon Medellin,
I voted for murder, and I saw that we were 6 and 6.
And Rudy Ruiz.
At no point did any juror think that he was innocent or that it was self-defense.
The problem was wording.
Because people really picked apart the definitions of murder and recklessness.
The jury of 6 women and 6 men spent hours discussing whether McDonald had intentionally murdered Andreen or if he had recklessly killed her, making it manslaughter. Murder carries a life sentence, manslaughter up to 20 years.
And I think most of us could agree that whatever happened, it was reckless. He left her on the ground, and he did not render aid. Now the trick was to try and convince the other jurors that it was murder.
But as the deliberations continued, some of the jurors had been swayed, with 9 now for manslaughter. Medellin says the biggest factor in swaying the vote was Andreen McDonald's testimony.
There was so little evidence, and so a lot of people believed, because we don't know anything else other than what he has told us, that we have to take what he told us. And he was actually able to convince a lot of the jurors.
And we had that one juror that he said, well, I've kicked someone and I never intended to kill them.
Medellin, Ruiz, and a 3rd juror were the staunch holdouts for murder.
No one was going to change anyone's mind.
The judge then invoked what's called an Allen charge, urging the holdout jurors to reconsider the evidence and reach a unanimous decision. After another hour of deliberations, a verdict.
And Mr. McDonald, please stand with your counsel. To the count of murder charged in the indictment, the jury finds the defendant not guilty of the offense of murder, as charged in the indictment, and guilty of the offense of manslaughter.
Andreen McDonald was found not guilty of murder, but guilty of the lesser charge, manslaughter. Andreen's sister Cindy was in disbelief.
In manslaughter, after he spoke with no remorse, no love, nothing at all, and used hammer, strip her clothes, throw gasoline on her, burnt her, and they gave him manslaughter. That's crazy. I am going to struggle with this thought until the day I die.
The prosecution had a mixed reaction to the verdict.
I was disappointed. However, the jury rejected his self-defense argument and held him accountable for at least something.
For the defense, Andreen McDonald may not have walked out a free man, but...
This is a win, despite how I believe that this is a self-defense case. I do respect the outcome.
Andreen's best friend, Mandy Hall.
He's there to tell his story. He's there to make up whatever he wants to make up. She can't do that because he took that away from her.
Cindy now sees that phone call from McDonald before the trial in a whole new light, as a calculated ploy to deflect blame.
It's 4 years. It took him 4 years for him to recognize that he did what he did. And then all of a sudden, he's reaching out to us to let us think that he's been responsible. He didn't mean anything. He is lying. All a lies. It's all a lie.
After the verdict, Sheriff Salazar reached out to Andreen's father, a retired member of the Jamaican Army, with an unusual offering.
I did present Mr. Anderson with a gift. I asked my deputy to remove the handcuffs from Andre as they put him back into the cell, and I presented those cuffs to Mr. Anderson.
I wanted them to feel some sort of connection to at least sending him away to prison.
I want to tell you that we really appreciate it. Thank you very much. God bless you.
For Andreen's mother, nothing about this tragedy makes sense. Her daughter and the beautiful life she had created are gone. Andreen McDonald, who came to America, became a successful entrepreneur and found her purpose in serving others. Sadly, the business she created is now closed.
I miss her very much. Most times when I think about her, it's like I feel like giving up.
And in those times, Maureen and Cindy lean on one another.
We're blessed to have each other to take us through this sad journey. When I'm weak, my mom is strong. When my mom is weak, I am strong.
We have to be strong for Elena.
Elena, now 12 years old, is the glue that binds this fractured family. A family that still includes Andre's mother, Jackie, though she is mainly left with the memories and the pain of what once was.
I think I hurt for Elena more than I hurt for everyone. No child should ever have to go through what she went through.
Maureen and Cindy are now raising Elena.
It's bittersweet because we have Elena.
Elena reminds us so much of Andreen.
Can mommy get a kiss? Love you.
A young wife and mother found with a strange mix of drugs in her system.
Hey, there's a needle right here.
It makes you stop breathing if you have too much.
Was it murder? Investigators turned to her journals for answers.
How crucial were those journals?
Very.
48 Hours, Saturday on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus. Real people, real crimes, real life drama.
In the mid-1980s, a young funeral home director named Bernie Teedy came to the little East Texas town of Carthage.
It's beautiful, yes. I love the people here in Carthage.
Carthage is just a small town of 6,000 people. A lot of people got very wealthy on oil and gas. There's a lot of little widows in town who have a lot of money, none more so than Mrs. Marjorie Nugent.
Bernie Teedy was running a con on my grandmother.
He picked up a gun, shot her 4 times in the back, and then he buried her in her own deep freeze.
My name is Bernie Teedy. You may have heard about me.
This is my story.
They did a movie about me called Bernie.
Jack Black was going to play you?
Yes.
Richard Linklater is my favorite filmmaker I've ever worked with.
All right, cut.
I'm Rick Linklater, and I directed the movie Bernie. There was something about this story that stayed with me, and I think it was that relationship, the Miss Nugent-Bernie relationship.
And the Bernie Tita that you know, is he a good man?
He's the sweetest guy. You know, he's a great man.
Very complex character. Is that part of what attracted you to this film?
The thing about playing Bernie is that he's lovable, and it's really important to Bernie that he be loved.
Perfect submission.
And I can relate to that.
Visions of right.
I have a little bit of that in me, too.
You know, this would be funny if it wasn't so damn sad.
Apparently, Marjorie was tough.
She was vile and hateful and just mean. Yo, wave hi. Hello.
She was very loving. I miss her. Bernie stole $3.8 million from my grandmother, and then he put 4 bullets in her back at close range.
How did this happen? And that was what the movie explored.
She didn't have a lot of friends. She didn't have a lot of people around her to take care of her and to love her. And that's where Bernie came in.
Did she ever look at you, Bernie, and say, Bernie, I love you?
Well, we often told each other that, yes.
She was a wonderful woman and didn't deserve to be executed by Bernie Tita.
I have to live with this every day of my life, and I don't like that.
I think the film is asking the question, can the nicest person in the world
I don't like thinking ill of Marjorie.
be capable of the worst act?
Let's go back and start the Bernie story from the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
Well, right here in East Texas.
One way or another, Bernie Tita has been dealing with death and darkness since he was 3 years old.
My daddy and my mother, they had a car accident, and my mother was riding in the passenger side of the car, and Daddy never forgave himself for that.
His mother dead, his father started drinking hard and died when Bernie was just 15.
So a lot of death had occurred in our family.
Things only got worse for Bernie. He claims he was molested by his own uncle, Elmer Doucette.
12, when my uncle began molesting me.
Doucette has always denied Bernie's allegations. Did it darken your world in some way?
Yes, it did.
Bernie learned firsthand that the wounded, lonely, and those the dead leave behind need comforting. This was Bernie Tita's world.
I guess you could say that's true, yeah.
Carlton Schamberger is the owner of Hawthorne Funeral Home, where Bernie worked for 9 years.
He was very successful here at Hawthorne's and as a funeral director overall.
He could do everything?
He could. He was talented, could do everything from makeup, hair, he could sing, he could preach.
Even out coloration, then apply highlights.
It would just be part of what inspired director Richard Linklater and actor Jack Black to collaborate on the darkly comic movie, Bernie.
Too much color does not make one look more alive.
He was on a lot of people's lists to literally sing them to heaven.
He knew how to take care of families.
He could connect that quickly.
He could connect, yeah, exactly.
So it wasn't long after 27-year-old Bernie arrived in Carthage back in 1985 that everyone seemed to know him. From the dusty dirt roads.
One of his excellent qualities was he was a gourmet cook.
Where Jack Payne and Ira Bounds live.
I think that he was well thought of amongst the little old ladies in town.
And at Comer's famous barbecue
He taught our Sunday school. He preached a funeral for us.
Even down at the courthouse. Did you know Bernie Tita?
Yes.
Where local legend District Attorney Danny Buck Davidson ruled back then and still rules today, everyone sensed something good had come to town.
You think, gee, I'm glad this guy came here. He's an asset to the community. Everybody loved Barney.
I come to the garden alone.
Well, I enjoyed singing in the choir. And then I got active also in the school here in the drama department. I was acting and doing in plays.
And you were oftentimes the star?
Oftentimes, yes.
Did you feel loved in this community?
Very much so. I felt very much loved.
Local ladies, Lisa and Susie Cockrell, sum it up simply.
He was a god. He was a god to
almost.
this
I mean,
town.
almost. People really saw him like that.
Yeah.
He's got a warmth, got a magnetism.
Just a super generous, sensitive guy, and is everybody's best friend.
Bernie Tita always had that human touch. He knew just what to say to bring a smile to anyone who needed it. So when a grieving, vulnerable widow came here to the Hawthorne Funeral Home, Bernie saw an opportunity to do what he did best.
In 1990, the town's leading banker and oilman, Rod Nugent, hard-nosed, tough, but fair businessman, dies.
Skip Hollingsworth covered the case for Texas Monthly Magazine.
And Bernie is in charge of his funeral.
I embalmed his body and got him ready for the funeral.
And Mrs. Nugent arrives.
And I'd met with her about the arrangements.
Marjorie Nugent would one day be portrayed by Oscar-winning actress Shirley MacLaine.
I saw her to the gravesite. We had the funeral service there, and then I took her back to the car.
Are you thinking to yourself, well, we've parted ways, we did some business, and never shall meet again?
Well, no, because that's not how I conduct funerals, as I often do with the widows, widowers. Check on them, go by the house, make sure they're all right.
Did they appreciate your dropping by?
Oh, very much so.
Wanted you to know that I was thinking about you.
Oh, thank you.
These times can be hard.
Well, Margie wasn't a huggy type person.
Ruth Cockrell would come to know as much as anyone in Carthage about the friendship of Bernie and Marjorie.
Well, we were first cousins.
Were you guys close?
We got pretty close.
Could Marjorie be difficult?
I think any of us can be difficult. I'm mean as an old setting hen sometimes.
In small towns anywhere, your reputation is not often defined by who you are, it's by what people think of you. And so the reputation did get around that Mrs. Nugent could be cantankerous.
Could Marjorie be mean?
Yes, sir. She could.
And another thing, newly widowed 74-year-old Marjorie Nugent was loaded with cash.
She would kind of be called a blue blood.
As much as $6 million.
Some soaps and a little bubble bath to soothe you in the tub.
Bernie Tita wasn't about to be turned away.
Come in. Oh, it would be my pleasure.
I felt sorry for Marjorie. I really did.
And soon, Marjorie and Bernie were seen on the scene, the odd couple of Carthage.
We'd go to the Cherokee Club. We would go to the jalapeno tree here in Carthage.
Yeah, they were a pair.
And it wasn't long before Marjorie wanted more than a part-time dinner date, and Bernie complied.
She asked me to leave the funeral home. She just wanted more and more and more of me around.
She actually hired Bernie and paid him a salary. There's this notion out there that you were attracted to Marjorie's money.
Yes, I'm aware of that. That was not part of the deal. That was not part of my wanting to be around Marjorie.
There's members of Marjorie's family that tell a different story.
Bernie Tita is what?
A thief.
Just 2 hours up the road in Dallas.
These are some of our old family photos of my grandmother.
3 proud granddaughters.
Everything that has been said about her is not her.
Have a very different take on just why Bernie was befriending Marjorie.
He saw her as a mark. He stole her money. When he was about to be found out, he shot her and killed her.
That's the real story.
That is the real story.
Is this case about money?
Yes, it is.
How so?
I think that defines everything.
The majestic gates swung open to a kingdom of riches, and Bernie Tita rolled right in.
I think the fatal mistake my grandmother made is she ended up buying a $30,000 headstone from Bernie Tita. From that moment, he marked her.
Within months of meeting at her husband's funeral, Bernie was full-time at Marjorie Nugent's eye-popping home.
Helping her with anything that she needed help with, make her coffee, make sure she was up, she was all right.
He was there for her.
They loved each other.
Yeah, Bernie loves everybody. And I think he's the one person in the world in that era who could feel that from Marge when no one else could.
I never thought of them as being lovey-doveys. Never. Just together, just friends.
I never saw them kiss.
You never did?
Nope.
And DA Danny Buck probably never would, because there was something about Bernie that made folks wonder back then.
I'm a gay man, and it's hard to be a gay man and being out in a small town.
Did Marjorie know you were gay?
We never discussed it.
Never discussed it?
No.
So what was the attraction? She's 42 years older than you?
Right.
He was targeting wealthy women.
Well, I think the attraction for Marjorie was the same as it was for everybody else in town. He was just a lovable guy. When you spend time with him, you want to hang out with him.
Less than a year after her husband's death, Bernie and Marjorie started hanging out big time, trading in the back roads for Broadway.
We'd go up on a Friday morning and then come back on Sunday. Saw Broadway shows. We had a lot of fun together.
Bernie Tita, the mortician who made about $24,000 a year, now had access to Marjorie Nugent's 10,000 square foot mansion in Carthage, her checkbook, and a world of opportunity.
They went on great adventures together.
Yo, wave hi. Hello.
They had a ball together. They traveled the world.
We went to Washington, Baltimore, and then took a cruise down the East Coast. We went to Germany, England, Scotland, and Wales. To Egypt, I went to the pyramids. We just went everywhere.
Was she having a good time?
She was having a great time.
He was her manservant.
Is it too busy?
The guy hired to take care of her every need, clipped her toenails, all the nitty-gritty.
And for Bernie, the perks kept piling up. Marjorie showered him with cash, clothing, cars, even flying lessons, and planes to go with it. And in turn, Bernie gave gifts to the good people of Carthage.
He provided money, he provided scholarships.
Doing good, doing a lot of good in Carthage.
Turns out he was generous with Miss Nugent's money.
He was kind of the conduit to her generosity, to her better angel.
She spoiled me rotten.
But the Nugents say their grandma never needed Bernie or anyone to teach her kindness.
My grandmother was a loving, sweet woman.
And she was kind?
She was. She was kind, and she loved telling stories.
This is really eye-opening, guys, to talk to you. This is really eye-opening.
In '93, we went there, and she opened the door, and she hugged me, and she kissed me like 8 times.
But whatever Marjorie's affection for her granddaughters, the stakes were about to change. Marjorie Nugent filed a new will, leaving everything to Bernie and nothing to her family. Did you encourage her to do that?
No, she brought that to me one day, and it was in 1991.
Why would she do that?
what I felt like she could trust me, I guess.
It was on one of the next family visits to Carthage that the Nugent women got a hint of how deeply Bernie had moved into their grandmother's life.
Flash forward to 1994. We go to see her, and she opens the door and she goes, "I don't know who you are." And I go, "What do you mean you don't know who we are?" And she goes, "I don't know who you are." She's like, "You need to leave."
And we went in, and there were pictures of Bernie everywhere. And we said, "Who is this? You know, Nanny, who is this?" And she said, "Well, he's my friend." And the thing that disturbed me was that all of the pictures of my grandfather were gone.
For Shanna, Alexandria, and Susan, Grandma Marjorie's new behavior was disturbing.
She was like a schoolgirl in love.
And the motives of her new companion, deeply suspect.
We believe that my grandmother was in love with Bernie and believed that he was in love with her.
When was the last time you guys saw your grandmother alive?
That visit in 1994.
And now they worried that Bernie was well on the way to tricking Marjorie out of millions.
I think it's the perfect example of a sweetheart scam that I have ever seen. My grandmother believed he loved her.
How do you know that?
Because I saw her.
But Bernie tells a different story, claiming that after 5 years attending to Marjorie, the relationship had soured. And that even though he had his own modest home, he felt trapped by Marjorie and wanted out. Bernie claims Marjorie's 24/7 demands had turned into an abusive relationship.
She was very mean-spirited, very abrupt with me, very...
Could she be abusive?
Yes, very much so.
In some ways, was her place his gilded cage, and she closed the door on that cage?
Yeah.
We were in a heated discussion about, I told her, I said, I can't do this anymore. And I said, I can't be your friend anymore. I just can't do this.
Go ahead, desert me.
She was very distraught. You can't leave me. You're not going to leave me. No one has ever left me.
I know you hate me.
So I backed my car out of the garage, and by the time I got out there, she had locked the gate on me. Until I finally I said, okay, I won't leave you. I won't leave.
Well, just park your car, jump over the gate, run, or, you know, whatever. But Bernie is not one built for conflict. I think he takes it as his fate. I can't get away from this woman.
The door's right there, Bernie. But it's not as simple as that.
People get trapped.
People get trapped.
No exit, no way out. And at least according to Bernie, feeling like Marjorie Nugent's prisoner reminded him of the abuse he says he suffered as a boy.
And in some ways, did you feel trapped in this relationship just as you had been trapped with your uncle?
Yes. Yes, I did.
I think he is a killer. I think he has no remorse. I don't believe a word that comes out of the man's mouth.
Bernie Tita claims it pains him to recall how controlling and cantankerous Marjorie Nugent could be.
I don't like the things that she did, but I don't like talking about them either.
Personally, and I think he's pure evil.
Let's move now to November 19th, 1996. Tell me about that day and what, from your perspective, led to the tragedy.
I had gone out to the house to make coffee early, 7:30. Got her up.
That's enough of that. I don't want you to talk about the shooting.
This is attorney Jody Cole. She would eventually become a big part of Bernie Tita's life.
This is all public records.
I do not want him to talk about the shooting.
And how his story would be told.
That's enough.
Yet when we spoke with Bernie, Jody Cole stopped him from telling those grisly details. Hard facts everyone from Carthage to Hollywood now knows.
Shot her in the back 4 times.
Shot her dead with this .22 caliber rifle.
The first bullet in her back makes her paralyzed, so she falls straight down onto the concrete. He shoots her again. He then walks straight up to her body, puts the muzzle to the gun to the back of her, and shoots it 2 more times.
Those graphic details would be missing from the movie.
I remember right before we shot that scene, I went up to Jack Black and I said, "Have you ever killed anyone in a movie?"
Like this?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was one of the hardest scenes in the movie. You see a scene like that in a script and you circle it in the calendar when you're going to shoot that, and you think about it a lot.
Marjorie, can you say something? Oh, no, Jesus, no, what have I done?
I'm sorry that that happened in my life. I caused the death of somebody that I loved.
Days turned into months as Bernie kept his awful secret. And Marjorie's family, they began to wonder what had become of Grandma.
I started asking my dad, have you heard from Nanny? I can't get her. And, maybe she's on another trip. She'll call you when she gets back.
And the Nugent women, all busy college students at the time,
This was Christmas. It's my grandparents.
admit there was a reluctance to reach out to Grandma Marjorie.
We had this strange encounter in 1994 where we didn't feel welcome.
And every Sunday he'd come sit right beside me and give me a full report on Margie.
And what were you thinking to yourself?
I'm thinking you're lying. That's what I'm thinking.
And I just made up one thing or another.
You told one she had Alzheimer's, another she was in the hospital.
It was such a difficult time.
And Mama would tell us what he had been saying. And it's like, Mama, are you crazy? He's either got her locked up in the house, poisoning her, or he's already killed her.
If I had gone to the police and then been proven wrong, I would have been laughed out of Carthage because people thought so much of Bernie.
So week after week, month after month passes, Marjorie's nowhere to be seen.
9 months. 9 months.
It was August 18th, 1997. The Nugents had finally shared their concerns with the local sheriff.
I get a call from my dad. He and I drive down. And it's clear that no one's been there for a very long time.
So, where was Marjorie Nugent?
I wanted to check the freezer. My grandmother was a child of the Depression, so you didn't waste food.
Turning back up the hallway.
So when Alexandria and the sheriff's deputies got to the house, she knew exactly where she wanted to go.
She walked down this hallway. Alexandria knew that if her grandmother had left the house, she would have put everything she kept in the refrigerator in a freezer located inside this pantry. She opened the door, and there it was.
It was so quick. It was like I walked in and I said, there's tape on the freezer.
And this is the freezer.
She untaped it and raised it up.
And threw the lid open.
And there was the top of Miss Nugent's head.
And I looked at my dad and I said, they found her. And he just kind of did this. And all I wanted at that moment was my mom.
Do I regret the fact that I didn't rush down there to stop him from doing this? Yes, because that's what you do when you love someone and you find out that the person that they were in love with shot them 4 times in the back, and you think, how could I have saved them?
While a motive remained unclear, there was zero mystery about the prime suspect.
Bernie's name was top of the list.
Bernie was easy to find. He was right in Carthage, at home, when the sheriff's deputies showed up and brought him in for questioning.
I was so relieved when they came for me and arrested me. It felt like this big weight had been lifted off my shoulder.
How could you come to my house, eat my food, and sing hymns, and my cousin over there in the deep freeze?
It's grim when You know, you see an old lady on video being pulled out of a freezer. Those are images that stay with you.
And I think it took 2 days to thaw her out and for them to do an autopsy.
Strange.
Yes.
That same day, Bernie Tita confessed to Panola County Sheriff's deputies that he murdered Marjorie Nugent.
There wasn't a question in anybody's mind. Everybody knew.
I think you're right.
Danny Buck Davidson would charge Bernie with first-degree premeditated murder and seek the ultimate penalty.
Life.
Life in prison.
Maximum sentence.
And that's when this twisted Texas tale really got strange.
People in the community were coming in saying Bernie was a real good guy. If he killed her, he had a reason for doing it. Poor Bernie. He had his groupies.
Bernie had his groupies?
Yep.
Some people are saying, hey, let him go. Some people are saying, no, put him away for life.
You just have never seen a story like this come across your desk, ever. And people still want to talk about it. They're still mystified about what really happened on that November afternoon that led Bernie to shoot her 4 times.
I'd stay in the garden with him.
Bernie Tita had preached and comforted and sang his way into this proud small town's everyday life.
He held a special place in the hearts of many people in Carthage, Texas.
Some folks even suggested Bernie was next door to the angels.
And I said, he's an angel, all right. He's an angel of death.
Your job as a prosecutor, you got a man who's admitted he put 4 bullets in the back of a little old lady.
Put her in a freezer and kept spending her money while she was dead.
And you have a community saying, leave him alone. That's,
right.
What would they say?
Go easy on Bernie.
It happens so often, he asked for a change of venue.
And he got one. The trial of Bernie Tita for murdering Marjorie Nugent was moved 50 miles away. And in February of 1999, Danny Buck told his tale to a jury who had never heard about Bernie.
I thought it was greed and betrayal. That's what I sold to the jury.
Bernie's defense was that he killed Marjorie in an act of passion, that her murder was not premeditated.
I don't know what happened that morning.
The jury did not relate to him. They related to me.
The trial lasted less than a week.
How long did it take this jury to make its decision?
I think it took them maybe 20 minutes to find him guilty.
9 years after he met Marjorie Nugent at her husband's funeral, Bernie was sentenced to life in prison.
Which is the top max sentence. And I felt pretty good about it.
I deserve time. I've done a particularly horrible thing, the worst thing in my life.
Case closed, except for this. Richard Linklater couldn't get the tale of Bernie Tita out of his head.
I ended up attending the trial and started thinking of this. Maybe there's a movie here.
Rick and Skip Hollingsworth wrote the Bernie screenplay and brought it to Jack Black.
And he said, hey, I never told you about this thing that I've been obsessed with, this story about this fella Bernie Tita. And so I said, let me read this thing.
Amazing. Jack Black became so intrigued, he agreed to play the lead role.
Action!
But not before he and Linklater paid a visit to a Texas maximum security prison to try and understand just who Bernie Tita really was.
I wanted to come and meet you. I still think it's important if I want to play a real person that I should meet you.
I'd love to be around people. I'm just a people person.
Black wanted to know what made Bernie tick, right down to what he felt in the days after he murdered Marjorie.
That must have been incredibly stressful.
Oh, good gracious.
That period with the walls closing in.
You have no earthly idea. It was absolutely horrendous.
If you're playing a person and you have access to them, you got to go see them. It's just one of the rules of the game.
I'm very appreciative of them coming to meet me.
And I have to stay here unless something changes.
Oh, there's one man in particular I can think of I'd sure like to talk to.
The movie Bernie also featured Matthew McConaughey as Danny Buck.
Danny Buck's coming to get you first.
Jack, Shirley, eyes right over here, please.
In April 2012, it premiered in Rick's hometown of Austin. Critics loved it.
This idea that my grandmother was a monster is ludicrous.
The Nugent family thought it was beyond offensive.
It was a complete lie.
It was devastating to us. I mean, they took the most awful part of our lives and just laughed about it and joked about it.
It's like he had cast a spell over the entire area.
And now, the Bernie Tita story was about to take yet another bizarre twist that began right at the movie premiere.
A little feisty lady comes up to me and says, I bet there was some, crazy stuff going on at the trial.
She's appeals lawyer Jody Cole. And after watching the movie, she got a hunch that the trial of Bernie Tita had been a miscarriage of justice.
I want the world to know that Bernie Tita is a good person and that this outcome is unacceptable. I said, look at that, he snaps. And so I thought, why did he get a life sentence?
She asked Linklater if he had the transcripts from Tita's 1999 murder trial.
He came with his boxes of transcripts.
Put it on her desk and it's like, I don't know, have at it.
Jody pored over the files, knowing that Bernie's life sentence hinged on Danny Buck's argument that the murder was premeditated.
And within a couple of weeks, she had come to see me.
Is there a miracle that's about to occur?
Yes, and Jody Cole did a lot of work toward that miracle happening.
All rise. Marjorie, are you okay?
That morning, I felt like I wasn't a part of the shooting.
16 years after he shot Marjorie Nugent dead, Bernie painted a picture for defense attorney Jody Cole about how he felt that awful morning.
I felt like I wasn't even there. And I have learned that that is called a dissociative episode.
I think it's a classic case of a kind of a disassociated moment.
That's what this whole case hinges on.
A dissociative episode. The new age psychological term would break the case against Bernie Tita wide open.
When they are overwhelmed with stress and emotion, they actually disassociate, which is leave their body.
And Bernie's body, the theory goes, killed Marjorie without his mind taking part.
And he shot her.
Yes, involuntarily.
The Nugent family would have their own take on Jody's ideas.
Not connected with reality.
Thoroughly confused.
This woman had been abusing him for a very long time, and his body acted in a way to end that abuse.
Bernie also confided in Jody what he says is his darkest secret about that childhood sexual abuse he claims he suffered at the hands of that uncle. Jody brought the findings to the DA, and he was sold.
What do you conclude in terms of why this murder occurred?
The child abuse and the abusive relationship. I think that he did not plan on killing her.
Danny Buck says if he had to do it all over again, he would have sought a much lighter sentence.
20 years would have been the maximum sentence. Not because Danny Buck wants 20, it's what the law says.
Danny Buck then went to bat for the killer he had once helped convict. And on May 6th, 2014,
Bernie Tita's life sentence thrown out.
A new sentencing trial is ordered, and Bernie is released from prison for the time being.
Lots of miracles have happened in my life.
The next miracle was in the parking lot.
Mr. Linklater picked me up, and we drove to Austin.
The real-life Bernie Tita just got out of an East Texas prison.
This is Bernie's little apartment. He lived down here.
He put me up in his apartment at his home.
In some ways, did Bernie become part of the family?
Yeah, very much.
I mean, did he ever babysit your kids?
Yeah.
In Austin, Bernie went about creating a new life, all on borrowed time. He joined the gay men's choir.
In the time of King Herod,
he became a regular at Pastor Sid Hall's church.
Our folks surrounded him like mother hens, just loving him.
He was definitely feeling the ecstasy of freedom.
Well, my first thought is, how is this happening?
The Nugent granddaughters found it all beyond belief.
Richard Linklater.
Conned. But Richard Linklater is just as conned as my grandmother was.
I think I'm pretty unconnable.
I think Danny Butt got enthralled with Hollywood.
I'll say that's BS.
Before the sentencing trial, Danny Buck recused himself. He was replaced by two prosecutors determined to put Bernie Tita back behind bars.
This was just a straight-up execution. I think he's conned Hollywood and he's conned the whole judicial system.
Jane Starnes and Assistant Attorney General Lisa Tanner weren't buying it. Bernie didn't have a dissociative episode.
This case is about abusing elderly, vulnerable people. It's about abusing Marjorie Nugent financially, and it's about just cold-blooded murder.
What do we have in front of us here?
We have just small portions of the paper trail.
Lisa Tanner would allege Bernie regularly forged Marjorie Nugent's signature.
He was very good at signing her signature.
Manually manipulated her bank accounts.
This is what he showed Marjorie, but this is what he really deposited. We had 14 of these.
Altered her brokerage statements.
The original of this document is literally a cut and pasted, dummied up statement.
All of this.
He's pocketing her money.
Both while Marjorie was alive and after Bernie had killed her and stuffed her in her freezer.
The numbers ended up being approximately $3.8 million total.
Bernie's motive for murder came into focus.
He was about to be found out about.
In April 2016, after 2 years of freedom, Bernie Tita's new sentencing trial began.
Is the jury here and ready to go?
It was moved to Henderson, Texas, because Bernie still had so many friends and fans in Carthage.
We'll begin with the state. Ms. Tanner.
Lisa Tanner put Bernie in her sights.
This is a real case with a real murderer. He did that.
And Hollywood.
So we're going to talk about that in a non-fictionalized, non-Hollywoodized kind of way.
Hollywood means, lack of morality.
Thank you, guys.
But I took that really personal because I don't live in Hollywood. I'm an indie Texas director.
Rick Linklater was called to the stand to defend his friend.
I think he's an incredibly nice, generous man who, did a horrible thing.
The director and those who love Bernie argued he had paid his dues with time already served.
16 years? Yeah, I'd say he served enough time.
And Bernie's uncle, under oath, denied ever having molested Bernie.
You say never, never.
But did admit writing him a letter sexual in nature. Bernie did not testify at the trial.
I mean, there are just some questions that don't have any answers.
Two dramatic versions of Marjorie Nugent's murder have now been told. One on the big screen, the other in a courtroom in Henderson, Texas. The question now is, who will the jurors believe?
Sudden passion, dissociative episode, snapping.
When he took that gun and pointed it down straight to the ground and put it in her back, that justified a life sentence then.
Bernie, are you a danger to society?
No, sir, not at all.
The jury goes out to deliberate. Alexandria, what's going through your mind?
At that moment, all you can do is pray.
On April 2nd, 2016, some 26 years after he met Marjorie Nugent, the jury once again sentenced Bernie Tita to 99 years in prison.
For 99 years of life.
everyone in that courtroom knew that my grandmother was not mean. She did not deserve to die, and that this man deserved to go away for the rest of his life.
When I heard 99 years, I mean, it was devastating.
He's back in prison for life. It's very discouraging.
Now, what's as certain as his life sentence is this. Deep in the heart of Texas, Bernie Tita is loved.
Even today, is there a Bernie Tita fan club in Carthage?
Yes. Not as big as it once was, but it's here.